Cannabis has quite a controversial history in the United States. The rise of its use among the American public has fueled a push for legalization that would roll back laws that were weaponized against Black and Hispanic communities. However, there is still an active debate over whether legalization is the solution to the problems created by the war on drugs. To understand this controversy, we must first evaluate the drug's past in American society. Following the Mexican Revolution in the early 1900s, smokable cannabis was introduced to the U.S. by refugees fleeing political instability. At the time, many Americans viewed immigrants, particularly of differing cultures and customs, as a threat to their interests and security, evidenced by the Chinese Exclusion Act and the discriminatory immigration quota system.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
When alcohol prohibition came to an end in 1933, Harry Anslinger, the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, feared that his job as well as the future of his bureau was at risk. He quickly reoriented his focus towards cannabis. Of course, he would only refer to it as marijuana as to emphasize its association with the recent influx of Mexican immigrants. Anslinger played on the fears of anxious white Americans by characterizing cannabis as violence-inducing in connection to Black and Hispanic people. Soon, the media adopted similar narratives demonstrated by the release of the movie Reefer Madness. The fear-mongering ultimately led to the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, which functionally outlawed cannabis.
Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide, and the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity.
Fear among the public meant that being tough on crime, including drug use and distribution, was a bipartisan litmus test for political success. Nixon's passage of the Controlled Substance Act of 1970 marked the onset of the war on drugs. The law categorized cannabis as a Schedule I drug, absolving it of any medical utility and characterizing it as uniquely dangerous. The result of the war on drugs was a dramatic increase in incarceration, particularly through targeting of Black and Hispanic communities. However, in the 1960s, marijuana began to lose its racial connotations among baby boomers when white college students also began to use the drug. With the rise of popular consumption of cannabis among younger generations, many of the lies and fear-mongering incited by the war on drugs became brutally self-evident. In 1973, Oregon became the first state to decriminalize marijuana, with a dozen other states following suit over the next 15 years. California voters passed Proposition 215 in 1996, making it the first state to legalize cannabis after its long prohibition. In the status quo, 15 states as well as D.C. have legalized cannabis. 29 states have either decriminalized it or made it legal for medical use, and only 6 states have refused to decriminalize or legalize cannabis. Though over half of American adults have reported using cannabis, there are still roadblocks to legalization due to a lack of bipartisan agreement on the issue. Some factions among the right wing still accept the same narrative of cannabis designed during the war on drugs, supporting that it be kept illegal and criminalized. However, the most productive discourse has not contested the need for decriminalization, but rather questioned the consequences of legalization. Social conservatives and some factions of the left have warned that legalization could result in the same abuses witnessed by the victims of the tobacco industry pre-regulation. They contend that recreational legalization would incentivize businesses to target young audiences who are more susceptible to addiction, making it so that they have a steady base of habitual users. A majority of the left hold the position that legalization is the only solution that will ensure the safety of users and their personal freedom. They argue that the free market is needed to destabilize the black market, which produces crime and unregulated products for consumers. They also contend that cannabis is less dangerous than alcohol and that the decision to use the substance should be left to the people, not the government.
Day one, we will change the Federal Controlled Substance Act, which, if you can believe it, now equates heroin with marijuana. That's insane. We're going to take marijuana out of that and effectively legalize marijuana in every state in the country.
With the recent surge of legalization in the last decade, as well as the rise of cannabis consumption in American culture, it seems unlikely that anything other than full legalization will eventually be the end result. However, it's important to acknowledge the opportunity for corporate abuse so that the transition to legalization can ensure the safety of the American public.